I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Golden 20s podcast. My name is Sadie, and I'm joined by my co-host Tegan. And today we are going to talk all about how to know when to quit your job, as well as give some advice and some tips if you are preparing to quit your job, just what that conversation with your manager should look like, and that sort of thing. But before we jump into that, we are going to do a connection card. So if you're new here, we are using the Get Closer Connection card deck from Intelligent Change. And today's question says, what is your most cherished childhood memory?
This one's hard.
Yeah. I think my answer is so nerdy. And it's kind of a silly answer. It's not anything in particular, but when I was a kid, I used to put on concerts in my bedroom. And I would sing an Avril Lavigne, Hilary Duff, or Ali and AJ album front to back. Don't skip any songs. And I would perform it for all of my millions of imaginary fans. I would literally go around the perimeter of my room and like put my hand out and like pretend I was hitting everyone's hand as I like walked around the stage. And in the summertime, we put up our trampoline in the backyard, and then I would perform concerts and do dance routines on the trampoline, sometimes with my friends, sometimes just by myself. I had a lot of imaginary friends when I was a kid, which I don't know what that says about me, but I did. So I feel like I was always just singing, and I love thinking back on that because it was always so fun, and it was just like the best way to like pass the time and like play, I guess. But now, as an adult, it still hits when it's like a Friday or Saturday night. I'm at home by myself, blasting my favorite songs, but now I'm like drinking a glass of red wine. And usually I don't act like I'm putting on a concert anymore, but I will just like, if I'm having like a bad week or a stressful day, whatever it is, I will still like dance and just like be absolutely ridiculous. And it just boost my mood so much. So it's funny to be like, some things will never change because that was me as a kid and this is me now. So I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind for me.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like for me, I have a lot of memories of my family camping, which were always really fun. And it's like the sweet spot of being old enough to be able to have like your own little like day adventures, like me and my brothers running around without my parents or like biking around without my parents, but still young enough where we were small to all fit. Like I come from a very big family, and so we still camp, but like we are big people. It's quite a different experience camping now. So it's like I just remember us like all, you know, squished on one bed. And my mom would always read to us. Like I have this memory of her reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire because she read all the books to us. We weren't allowed to read that one until like someone turned a certain age because it starts with a death. And there hadn't really been like an on-page death at that point. So whatever the rule was, we weren't allowed to start it until the summer. And we went camping, and I remember her reading that like opening chapter where, you know, someone dies and we were all like cuddled together and so scared and just like, oh my God, this is so scary. And it's, yeah, just really funny. Just the thought of like the three of us even being able to fit on one bed is crazy. So
yeah, that is crazy to think of now.
Yeah.
But I love that. And it's so like fun that it was like the camping, but then how it ties into like also Harry Potter and like your parents reading that to
all
you.
childhood
like,
memories
so
lead back to Harry Potter. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
That's so funny. I love that. What a cute.
Awesome.
Yeah, at first I was like worried. I was like, oh no, I don't know if I'll be able to think of anything.
Yeah.
But I love our answers. That's such a cute, wholesome way to kick off a podcast episode. Love that.
It's also funny that yours is very like independent and mine is not. Mine's like my whole family was squished together and my mom's reading to me. Yours is like I'm by myself and I am kicking
imaginary,
ass.
I have imaginary friends. Who needs real friends?
I don't need anyone else.
But that is so classic childhood Sadie. Like I literally felt so like misunderstood and I need to like write my song lyrics to like I don't even know what I was going through, but it was like music's my outlet.
Yeah. So
funny. Oh man. So funny. But love that.
Great. Well, shall we be talking about how to quit? Which I will say is very top of mind for me because I just quit my job. Whoop, whoop.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you. And it's actually the first time I've ever had to quit a job in my entire life, which is crazy.
Wow.
I've only ever been fired or laid off. Classic like millennial 20s experience.
Yeah, that's so like more exciting, so much more exciting and like worth celebrating. It's such a power move to quit your job.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting vibe. I was so anxious about it, like the 15 minutes leading up to it, where I was like, I might be like physically sick from how anxious I am. And then, of course, it was fine. Like, this is just classic Tegan behavior. But so now I feel equipped to actually give advice on this because I just did it.
I love that so much. I feel I'm in the fortunate position where I've always quit my jobs. Knock on wood, haven't been laid off yet. Again, knock on wood. But it's always hard. And I always find I quit on my terms. I think throughout my career, I've gotten better at vocalizing my wants and needs before I quit because initially, like the first time I quit a job, it was very much like, this isn't working for me anymore. And I had all this like pent up resentment and like anger. And then when I quit, my boss was kind of like, I had no idea you felt this way. Like, why didn't you tell me? We could have done something about it. Where the last time I quit, which was just last summer, moved to a different job, I had very, very, very clearly told my boss for like at least 6 months to a year exactly what I wanted from the role, exactly what I wanted to take like as my next step. And he was telling me, you know, he's going to support me, he's going to help me get there. And then when there was no action, like I consistently followed up with him on it. So when I actually quit, he was like, I'm not surprised at all. I saw this coming. I know we can't give you what you're looking for, but it's like, at least I gave them a chance, you know? So all this being said, I feel like even I've learned a lot by going through the motions. And it is definitely one of those things, like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it and you learn from every experience. But I think I just want to start kind of on that vein of just reminding you guys listening that you are 100% in the driver's seat of your career and you really need to dictate like the narrative of your career. So it's, if you have goals and you have, you know, titles or salary goals in mind, like I think it's really important to talk about that openly and transparently with your manager. And if you have a good manager, which are few and far between, but if you have a good manager and a supportive company, chances are they're going to want to like help keep you happy in your role, help you learning and growing in the company. Like worst case scenario, you would have to leave to like fulfill that like role or that desire for yourself. But I think at least giving the company like a chance, you know, And then it's like, if it doesn't work out, then you can quit. But all that being said, just want to kind of start with that, because I think a lot of people either feel, first of all, sometimes like loyal to a company where it's like, oh, I've been here so long, or they'd be lost without me, I can't quit. Or they feel entitled to a promotion just because they've been there for a certain amount of time, or, you know, just they're kind of like waiting for their boss to give them a promotion, where it's like, no, you really need to be the one to start these conversations, hold your manager accountable to them, and then take action. If that means, you know, quitting your job sometimes, so be it. So yeah, that's my coming in hot with the pep talk.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's such good advice. I know, like, I've talked about this before in the past, but the first time I got a title promotion was because I literally asked for it. I was an assistant editor. I said, I'm not assistant editing. I'm actually doing editing. I think my title should be junior editor. And my boss was like, absolutely, that's a great point. We'll change your title tomorrow. And then the other people on my team, when it was announced, were really annoyed because they were like, well, that's almost my title. I've been doing this for, 10 years more than you, and my title's just editor. And one of them actually said to me, well, maybe I should just ask to be a senior editor. And I was like, yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I support
you know
you
what I
in
mean? But they were in that situation where they had worked there, 5 years, however long it was. And they were like, well, why is this person who just started getting promotions? And literally it was because I asked. Like, the company, they're worried about keeping, the company afloat, making moves. They're not worried about, like, oh, this person who started 2 years ago has the same title and only got a 2% raise. Like, if you're not advocating for it, it's not top of mind for these people. Like, HR doesn't care that you haven't had a title change, You have to be advocating for yourself. And then it also, like, if you're an empathetic person, I think takes some of the guilt off of you for leaving. So that was a big thing for me, is I'm like, I don't want to like screw people over by leaving, but if you're voicing that things aren't working and nothing's done to make a change, then it's kind of like the guilt's off your back. You're like, well, I brought it up. So there's that element too.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great way to put it. And I wasn't thinking of the word guilty, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, like that totally resonates. I just couldn't put my finger on that emotion. But in any case, thought we would start with knowing when you should quit, and then we'll get into some tips on how to actually quit. So again, I think we've thrown out some ideas here, but for me, I've always, again, been in a very fortunate situation where I've always quit a job because I'm ready to take the next step in my career. So the last time I quit my job, I was very open and honest with my boss that I wanted to manage a team. And when this opportunity came up in my current role to manage a team of 7 people and to have a manager title, and I wasn't doing like executional work anymore, my sole responsibility was managing a team, it made complete sense why I was leaving my old position to accept this new position. I also had a salary number in mind. I will say that this can be really bad advice because I think everybody wants to make a lot of money. So it's important that if you are having a salary goal, it's actually realistic for your industry and the job title, and you're doing your research. You're not just pulling a number out of thin air being like, I want to make this much money. For me, it was also just like crunching the finances and like seeing, the salary jumps I've made in the past, kind of like what's the next step for me. So all of that really came together to be why I was looking for a new job and then why I ended up quitting my last job. But again, just want to reiterate how all of this I really like voiced to my manager, really tried to make work at my last role. And then it was only a matter of, okay, my manager literally said to me, like, unfortunately, I can't give you a raise. Unfortunately, we're not going to be growing your team. That I was like, okay, you know what? This is giving me now the sign that it's time to quit. And in order to get those things, I need to look at an external opportunity. I think similarly to that is you've learned everything you can out of your role. And it could also be you've learned everything you can from your manager or your mentor, or even just like from the company as a whole. So that was another big thing. At the last company I worked for, I had actually worked for them 2 years prior to restarting there. And I really felt like, you know what? This company's done things the same way ever since I started, like years and years and years ago. I don't think I'm actually going to be learning new experiences by continuing to work here. It's time I actually, for the role and salary reasons I mentioned, but also just to get like a completely new experience from a completely new company. It was time for that. So definitely also supported my decision to quit. And then last thing I want to mention is there's also like lots of research done around this where if you're looking to make a big salary jump, it is more effective to actually quit your role and apply to or get hired as an external candidate at a new company rather than just climbing the corporate ladder at your existing role. So just like getting promoted within your existing company just shows that, if you're wanting to make salary jumps, which I was, that's also a key sign to quit your job as well.
Yeah, 100%. The first sort of things that came to my mind when thinking about like reasons to quit, first is you're overworked. This I feel like is classic experience, especially when you're new in your career, where if you find your job is just like stressing you out all the time, you're constantly having to work overtime just to like get the bare minimum done at your job. That means you're overworked. And then especially if you're like dealing with like your team's consistently understaffed, they're never like hiring, people are leaving and then they're not replacing them, or you're dealing with a micromanager, that sort of workplace. If you're starting to feel those effects, that's definitely, I think, a sign it's time to move on. And on the other hand, I also think if you're being underutilized, like, I feel like it's so easy to fall into the trap of, well, I'm just making a paycheck here. Like, I'm comfortable. Right. I don't have to worry about it. And this is where I feel like I see a lot of my friends sort of stuck, and they're stuck in a job they don't like. It makes their weeks drag on because they're barely like even doing work. But this can be one really like unsatisfactory for something that you're doing 40 hours a week. And it can also like really limit your career development, which can be problematic in the long term. And so this was also like a part of my decision to quit, was thinking about the big picture of my career. The longer I thought I stayed at my current role, the worse things like my professional portfolio would look, and, like my LinkedIn job journey, things like that. You have to consider the big picture of your career as well. So as easy as it is to be like, well, I barely do anything and I get paid, so maybe I'll just stay here forever, it can also be sort of problematic.
Totally. I think something that's so underrated is feeling challenged in your role. And like, you need to feel challenged in order to be fulfilled. So I totally hear you on the underutilized. And I also think that's when you also start to get like unmotivated, no energy, and then it's also hard to apply for new roles. And then on the opposite hand, when you're overworked, you're completely like emotionally drained, also don't have energy to apply for new roles. But I feel like it's so important in both of those cases to like acknowledge that. And sometimes too, like, I think every business and company has its seasons where there's slow seasons, really busy seasons. So it's also like, is this like a common theme of being under or overworked, or is it just like a time of year for the company? Like, I think all of these things you need to weigh through, but I totally hear you, Tag. And the one thing that kind of came to mind for me that I feel like resonates with both of those points is just it's a toxic work environment. So I feel like if you're constantly overworked, like you said, that really starts to impact your mental health outside of work hours. And that has definitely been something I've experienced before where it's like this job is not sustainable. The company culture is not sustainable. And that's like a long-term problem. It's not just a for now problem. And that encouraged me to quit. I quit like a job after having like my first ever panic attack, being like, oh yeah, okay, this job does this to me now. That's not good. Time to find something else. So try to get ahead of it essentially before that happens. But I feel like all of that you can also round up to like other things that you would like say it's a toxic work environment that you're trying to get free of.
Yeah, 100%. Like if your Sunday scaries are terrifying and they're starting, you know, Saturday morning, Friday night, like get out. That's a bad sign.
Yeah. And you actually brought up a great point around like your manager. Like some managers you just don't get along with. And unfortunately, like you can't really choose your manager. Like they might seem fine in the interview process, but then when you actually see their management style, it's like, oh gosh, you know, we are not compatible. Same with the people you work with. Like you can't choose them either. So it's like, if you just dread going to work and like everyone rains on your parade and it starts to impact your mental health, falls into that whole toxic workplace, like, that's definitely a sign to get out.
Yeah. I think another thing that came to mind for me is if your company is unstable, this is a sign to start looking for work. And I can say this as someone who's been laid off, but your company's, you know, stability directly affects your employment status. So if your company is not doing well, if you think, you know, they're risking closing, start looking now. Because leaving unsteady organizations early means that you find a suitable job in your pay range and that you kind of have the power in the interviewing process. Where if you're laid off, you get 2 weeks to try and find a new job or you're out of paychecks. So if there's any sort of like red flags around the financial stability of your company, that means you need to start looking.
Yeah, totally. I think the only other thing I want to add, which again, I feel like I already kind of touched on, is just you're wanting to get a new experience. And I think this is also you're wanting to like take on a completely different role. So not just like the next step in your current trajectory, but it's like, I want to try something totally different, or maybe it's the same role, but a completely different industry. Also, like I was saying, there's benefits of seeing how different companies operate. Like, for instance, an example of this is at my last company, I was a manager, but what manager meant to that company that was very, very small and everybody did everything. The teams were very small. The people management was very small. A manager there is very different from a manager at the company that I'm currently working at that is huge and the teams are huge. And, you know, like the manager responsibility is very much like the HR-y stuff. I'm not doing the day-to-day tasks like I was expected to do at my last company, despite having a manager title. So all this being said, I feel like just a different company could also be a new experience. But all of this, I think, is really important to keep in mind when you're young and you're still trying to figure out your career. Like I think most of us or some of us, if we're lucky, have kind of like an end goal in mind, but it's like you don't need to get there in your first 5-10 years of your career. Like even now I think about, okay, I'm a manager at like a big corporation here in Canada, but I also still have 40 years, maybe not 40. I'm blanking on my math here, but like a long time until I retire. So it's like, I'm on the path I want to be on, but I still have a lot of my career to go where maybe one day I just completely change things up to get a completely different experience. And that's okay too. So oftentimes, like you can sometimes, I guess, move laterally within your company, but it's often, if you're really wanting a whole new experience, it's best to seek that at a different company and quit your current role.
Yeah, there's this great Denzel Washington quote that I saw.
First part of your life you learn, second part of your life you earn, third part of your life you return.
Can you be my therapist?
I already am.
And I feel like that's very true.
that.
Where at this point, like, we're not making, like the big money moves. We're trying to, retire in the next 10 years. I'm trying to spend this portion of my career learning and gathering the skills that I need so that in the later part of my career, that's when I can start, making the big bucks and making the money moves and that sort of thing. So it's like, if you are stuck in a role where you're not able to be learning, it is hurtful to your career, even though on paper it's like, yeah, it seems great that you're staying at a company for a really long time. But if your skills, like, especially, I work in social media, if you're not keeping up with the trends, it's hurting your career, even though it shows that you're loyal and stable.
100%. I love that quote so much.
Yeah, Denzel.
I've never heard that before. Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it and I'll like insert it because you have to hear it in his voice too.
Oh yeah, that would be so good.
Great. Well, now we can talk about the sort of like how-tos of resigning from your job, quitting from your job. I think the main sort of piece of advice I give is, unless like shit's going crazy, try not to burn this bridge. So that's kind of, the approach that we're going to take with all of this, advice. And the other main thing I want to say first is, unless, again, shit's going crazy, do not resign until you have a signed contract from your new position. Like with today's job market, you can be job hunting for months or years. Like, I've been applying to jobs for 3 years. It is crazy out there. So don't assume just because you're qualified that, one, you can get a job, or two, maybe you can get a job, but maybe not the pay you're currently making. So this is something to keep in mind. I know it can be exciting if you're like, in the last round of the interview, your work's really annoying you. You're like, I'm just going to resign, but don't do it until you have it in writing.
Yeah, 100%. This was more like through the pandemic, but I heard stories of, actually, I even saw it at the company I worked for where somebody quit. And then before they even started their new role, the company was like, actually, we're having to lay people off, or, there was just uncertainty where they didn't even start that role. So then they came back to the company I was working at being like, actually, can I like revoke my resignation? Where obviously that's an extreme case. Like, I feel like they had signed and they still had like kind of changed their mind kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, try to do as much as you can on your side to mitigate that from happening.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, just having that signed contract and like, I don't know, covering your bases as much as you can.
Exactly. And that goes back to like not burning the bridge. Because if you're like, I'm leaving now, fuck y'all, then you hear like your job fell through. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, you can come back to work. You know what I mean? Like, as much as, that would be more satisfying, that's probably not the best advice.
Yeah. I think while we're talking about contracts, I think it's also important to know your existing role contract. And why I say this is, I work in retail, and a lot of companies, if you're going to work for a direct competitor, you don't give notice. They actually like walk you out on the spot. So for instance, when I was working at Home Depot, if I had gone to Home Hardware, which is like another hardware store here in Canada, or like anything adjacent to Home Depot, and I quit, they would have been like, okay, you're going to a competitor. You can't go back to your desk, pick up your stuff. You have to leave the premise immediately, and like, we'll send you your stuff essentially. So, and then actually even the last company I quit, they were supposed to walk me out, but they needed me too much. So they let me fulfill my 2 weeks. And I was like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah.
But in any case, all this being said, you want to be prepared for that. So not saying that this is necessarily like a common thing. For me, it seems to be common for the companies I work for. I don't know if that is the case for many industries, or even in the States, if you're listening, like if that's a common thing, I don't know. But all this being said, if it is a thing, it will be stated in your contract, the contract you signed when you started your current position. So it's just good to know so that you can be prepared. And why I say that is because it'll also, like, mentally you're prepared, but you can also start to like save files from your computer that you might want. You might want to, start packing your stuff up in your desk if you know you're not going to go back to it. Like, all these little things just to like help you be prepared if that is your case. I think it's just good to know. And that's it. That's all I had to say on that.
Yeah, 100%. Treat like your work computer, your work email, everything as if when you have this conversation, that's the last time you'll see them. And so, like for me, a lot of my work relies on a portfolio and things like that. So before you're resigning, you're downloading all of the things you've created so that you can, include them in your portfolio. Because if you're leaving, you can't reach out to your work like 3 weeks or 3 years later and be like, hey, could you send me that video I made? That sort of thing. So definitely something to keep in mind. I know a lot of people even just like clear their computers before they go to have that conversation, just to be safe, especially if you have like personal stuff on it or whatever, because they could be like, yep, taking your computer, that's it, bye. I do think like this is more, I think, common if you're working for big companies and companies that have like big HR processes. In my experience, I've only been walked out when fired.
Yeah.
So I wish I cleared my computer. Didn't get the option.
Yeah. I find the walkout when you quit so silly because when you're going to quit. So you can take all your files to use at your competitor. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a silly thing, but it just seems to be the company like power move to be like, oh, you think you're going to quit? Well, we get the last say here. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. So it's like you have to approach this knowing, like, hopefully, everyone understands it goes well, but your employer could just be like, yeah, well, you're fired. Bye-bye. Like, you have to kind of go into it with that mindset. And then hopefully if it goes better, that's good.
Yeah. I'd also say in terms of preparing and like kind of having an idea of how that conversation is going to go when you do quit, I think it's also important to know and decide, are you open to a counter offer or are you quitting no matter what? And why I say that is I've actually been in a position of I'm quitting no matter what. And I've been in a position of I'm quitting, but I actually don't want to quit. It's just I have another really great offer, but I wasn't really looking for it, So in that case, I sobbed, which I do not recommend. Quitting, like sobbing while you're quitting, but I was just so shook. And I loved my manager at that job where I was like, it just sucks to like even be in this position. But in any case, they actually did counter offer. He asked me like, are you open to seeing what I can do to get you to stay? And I said yes. And then, he quickly worked some magic, came back a counter offer. So it's like, that might be something that they ask you and you want to be prepared. You don't want to just be like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Or just come in super hot and be like, I quit. That's it. Yeah. And then, you know what I mean? So it's like either if you're open to a counter offer, I think that'll really guide how you approach that conversation. If you're not, maybe you do go in a little bit hotter and just get right to the point and like tell them this is my last day based on the notice you're giving, whatever. But I don't know, just something else to keep in mind and also prepare for.
Yeah, definitely. I think as far as like preparing to have this conversation, one of the things I did was I already had my email sort of written out, and this would be your written notice. So it's just reiterating the points you wanted to say. Like mine was along the lines of like, I'm so grateful for all of my time here, but I'm going to have to resign from my position of X. My last day will be this day. Thank you so much, that sort of thing. And have that on standby to send basically as soon as your conversation is done. And then schedule a one-on-one super quick meeting with your manager or whoever the person is that you're resigning to. I know some people believe in sending like a message ahead of time saying like, hey, just letting you know, I'm going to be resigning. This is what that conversation's about. I think that really depends on like, that's not my vibe.
Done that.
Yeah, I feel like that's more.
They always
I don't
know. For me, they always know. I'm just like, hey, I need to chat with you. They're like, oh, she's quitting.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Sadie
I
wouldn't
am.
be chatting with me unless the shit was going down. But yeah, I've never sent the message. I know some people do like to give the heads up or whatever, but schedule a quick one-on-one and just focus on like the high level details, especially when, your notices, when your potential last day is, I don't think you need to get into the nitty gritty of like, I'm leaving because I didn't get this, blah, blah, blah. Like if we've been open and communicating about it, they know why you're leaving. You know what I mean? If they ask, you can tell them, but I don't think you have to be like, I'm getting way more money, so that's why I'm leaving. Like everyone knows that.
Yeah. I feel like I go in telling them a few reasons why I'm leaving. Like,
yeah,
it's often really rooted in like, as you know, to your point, Tag, where it's like,
exactly,
these are already conversations we've had. But like when I quit my last job, it was very much like I got an opportunity to manage a team of 7 people. As you know, that's what I'm looking for in my next role. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't in a way of like, screw you guys, like this is everything I wanted. It was just like this isn't a decision I made lightly. This is something that I put a lot of thought into, and I feel in order to, you know, get what I want, I have to leave. So I feel like I usually have like 1, 2, or 3 like super high level points that are like, this is why I'm leaving, and they're never related to money. But that being said, your manager might also ask you, where are you going to work? And again, you can or cannot share this information with them, completely up to you. In my case, knowing they cared if it was a competitor or not, I've always told them, and like I never cared. So I'm like, I'll tell you where I'm going. But if they ask you like, how much are you making, or what are you doing, all the like the small details, that's where I'm like, I draw the boundary, and it's like, nope, I'm not sharing any of that information with you. All you need to know is I'm leaving, this is why, this is my last day, that's it.
100%. And I think, again, like I've already kind of touched on this, but I think it's important to, you know, be respectful, try not to burn the bridge, especially if you're staying in the same industry. Like here in Canada, our industries are pretty small. So something to keep in mind, it can be easy, I think, to just be like so stoked about leaving and then burn that bridge, which can be, you know, like problematic. You might just run into them at a conference or something, and then it's like you've made your life awkward for no reason.
Totally. And I think part of like not burning the bridge, it's always nice to end that conversation with your manager, that one-on-one, being like, let me know how I can help in the transition. And I know that's like a textbook thing to say, but I really do think it goes a long way and shows like, yeah, I'm being respectful. I'm trying to do what I can before I go. However, I will say, as somebody who's said that many times, and then my boss throws everything at me, like, oh, like literally last year I quit in May, and my boss wanted me to plan out our entire back to school season. So plan out the whole summer and then back to school, which is the biggest time of year for that company. And I was like, I don't even have the information to plan this out. Like, you're literally asking for me to plan out like the next 6 months. Like, no, I'm not going to do that, you know? So anyways, all this being said, put out the offer, but then don't kill yourself, like bending over backwards, working really late hours in the last 2 weeks of your career, because you also don't owe the company that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if it were reversed, they would just let you go if that was what was what they decided. So it's like, you don't need to kill yourself for the company. But I do think it is nice to put in a little bit of effort to like help that transition. Maybe you put together like a transition document, just outlining some of your key tasks, or outlining where some of the key files are saved, things that you reference on the day-to-day, maybe a status document where you're at in certain projects, and then share that with your boss or a coworker. But you probably don't need to do too much more than that.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I think like once this conversation's done, you can send your email, send it to the appropriate people so that you have, you know, a paper trail basically showing that you left. And I do think it's nice in that, you know, email to say like, I'm happy to help with the transition. Like, I'm grateful for my time here. You know, keep it positive all the way through. I think that can make a really big difference.
I agree.
Great. Well, that I think was everything we were going to tell you about when you should quit, how you should quit, all that good stuff. So hopefully you got some helpful tips and tricks. And I do feel like this is something that it's like hard to know how to do. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's so much. Yeah. And like, I see so many TikToks that are like, here's how to prep for a job interview. Here's how to like fix up your resume and stuff. But it's a part of like the job world that isn't really talked about. So hopefully we had some good insights here. If you are thinking about quitting your job, definitely do it. Start looking now, because who knows how long the job hunt will take. I can say from personal experience. So definitely get started on that. Well, I guess that is where we will leave it this week. We put out an episode every other Tuesday, so make sure you're following us and subscribe to us so that you see when those new episodes drop. And you can also follow us on social media. We are at our Golden 20s on almost all the platforms. And we also have a Patreon page, which is the best way to show your support for the podcast for as little as $2 a month. That's everything. So thanks for listening.
I'm laughing because I'm like, remember last time I signed off with "see you next time"? Do I say it again?
I don't know.
See you next time, guys.
Perfect.
Bye.